haunting darkness lingered over the ruins of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Once a beacon of childhood joy, it now stood as a grim testament to horrors that couldn't be forgotten. William Afton, a man whose heart had grown cold and twisted, wandered among the shadows of his past. The maddening silence seemed to echo the cries of his victims, those children who had been stolen from their families and their futures. He couldn't escape the weight of his sins, the burden that pressed upon his soul like an unrelenting nightmare. As he gazed at the remnants of the animatronics, their once cheerful faces now twisted into grotesque masks, he felt a chill crawl down his spine. Those lifeless eyes seemed to follow him, accusing and vengeful. They were the very embodiment of his transgressions, a reckoning that refused to be postponed any longer. The origin of this apocalypse had been his own doing. A fool's ambition had driven him to experiment, to toy with the boundaries between life and machine. He had breathed life into the animatronics, only for them to be cursed by the agony of the innocent children whose lives he had stolen. His arrogance had birthed an insatiable hunger for revenge, and now, as his world crumbled around him, he couldn't escape the consequences. In his solitude, his thoughts were a symphony of justification. He had always felt like a failure, a man overshadowed by the success of Henry Emily, his once friend and partner at Fazbear Entertainment. Jealousy had festered within him, especially after the tragic accident that claimed his own son's life in one of the pizzerias. His envy was his poison, and his grief became a festering wound. It was that poison that had driven him to commit the unspeakable acts that had forever stained his hands. The jealousy had twisted into a raging fire, and on that fateful day in 1987, he had lured 5 innocent children into his trap. The agony he felt, the desire to see others suffer as he had suffered, had driven him to murder those children and stuff their lifeless bodies into the animatronics. He tried to silence the voices of guilt that whispered to him in the night. The tormented faces of the children who had haunted his every waking moment. He had told himself that it was necessary, that he was setting them free from their suffering. But deep down, he knew the truth. He'd been consumed by darkness, driven to play God with their lives. And now in this ruined world, he found himself haunted by the very souls he had tried to obliterate. He could feel their eyes on him, their accusations cutting through the void of his existence. He was tormented by the fear that they would come for him, seeking the revenge that was so rightfully theirs. As he stood amidst the wreckage, his heart raced at the thought of the animatronics, corrupted and possessed, finally breaking free from their mechanical prisons to exact their vengeance. He could imagine them twisted and contorted, fueled by an insatiable rage that mirrored his own twisted desires. The memories of his actions, the faces of the children he had robbed of their lives, plagued him without mercy. He had once believed that his power and ambition would grant him control over life and death, but now he understood the folly of his arrogance. The darkness he had unleashed had consumed him, body and soul. And so in the cold embrace of the post-apocalyptic world, William Afton found himself in the grip of his own creation, a nightmare of his own making. He was trapped in the cycle of his sins, haunted by the very specters he had tried to escape. As the world crumbled, he realized that the true horror was not the mechanical monstrosities that surrounded him, but the darkness that had taken root within his own heart.